Welcome to the podcast series Talking Success, connecting the global FinTech community. I'm Stacey Jafta, and today I'll be chatting with Leanne Bonner-Cooke, founder and CEO of e-Bate Limited. e-Bate is an affordable SaaS solution for decision makers who need to implement and gain control of rebate management quickly, improving margins and reducing risk through data insights. Hi, Leanne. How's it going?
Hi, good afternoon, Stacey. Very well. How are you?
Good. How's the last couple of days been, weeks been?
It's been interesting, hasn't it, with the whole COVID situation. So we were just starting to see light at the tunnel and lockdown was starting to lift. And then unfortunately, being in Leicestershire in the UK, that's now gone back into lockdown because the cases have started to increase again. So it is very, very different. It's challenging times, I suppose, but I just think we have to adapt with the situation that we're facing today.
How has that impacted business?
Various, really. I mean, we've just tried to do an investment. Well, we have been successful in doing an investment round. So that was challenging, trying to get new, fresh money coming into a business during this time, because a lot of the venture capitalists are looking after their own portfolios of companies. Also from people buying pieces of software at this time, I think, again, we've had a lot of inquiries. So it says to me that people are having more time on their hands to maybe look at potential projects for the future. But in terms of actually doing projects, then I think with distributed workforces, etc., at the moment, that has slowed things down quite considerably.
Can you give a quick elevator pitch on e-Bate Limited?
Yeah, absolutely. So e-Bate Limited is an end-to-end rebate management solution for decision makers that really want to gain control of their process end-to-end, improving visibility, reducing risks.
I want to hear it all. I'm excited to dive into your story. Tell me about your journey to building your career and business.
So my career started off, I didn't particularly like school. I'm dyslexic, and in those days it was very much not necessarily recognised as it is today, so you didn't get very much help and support. But I was good at numbers. So when I left school, I went into an accountancy role. So I went to work for a large pharmaceutical company, and I trained on the job doing accounting. So I did my AAT qualifications and then went in to do CMA. So it took me 5 years, but obviously during that 5 years, I was being paid well. I was gaining lots of commercial knowledge, and then becoming qualified at the same time. Then after that, once I became qualified, I thought, this accountancy isn't for me. It's quite boring. What did I want to do? And technology had just started coming into the workplace. So everybody was starting to get a desktop on the desk. Email was starting to come out, and everybody was having access to it. And I could just see the advancements and improvements that technology could make to a role and a job. And at the time when I was doing accounting, it was all big red ledger books that were handwritten. And at the time, I built macros and things using Lotus 123, writing WYSIWYG macros, and quite quickly you could see how you could save so much time and become so much more productive through the use of technology. So that really inspired me then into perhaps switching career. So within the same business, I moved into their tech team, and I started off as a Novell network engineer, for those that are old enough to remember Novell networks. And and that was really then, just installing the hardware and things like that. My career then just moved around different roles in IT in a corporate world. I did project management roles, business process improvement roles, and they were all linked to identifying how technology could drive revenue improvements for a business and really remove the waste and the duplication of effort, etc. So that's what I ended up doing. Ironically, I found myself being in very male-dominated industries for quite some time. So I worked in textiles, I worked in construction, and construction is where I finished my corporate career back in 2007. So I was one of the senior managers in the management team at Lafarge UK in the time, and that company was the top 5% of females, and it's just staggering, really, that at that company with only 5% of females being at that senior level, that was quite interesting for me. That also was my decision point to move out of the corporate world and go on my own, because I always struggled to get to that next level of the career that I wanted. So I thought, well, hey, I'll do it for myself then. So in 2007, I left that career, and that was my first venture into starting my own business.
You have seen great success and have never let dyslexia dictate your future. What message do you have for those that have learning difficulties and may feel a little defeated by them?
I would say don't be defeated. You look at most entrepreneurs and they have some sort of disability or disadvantage, like
Mm,
dyslexia, various levels of autism, etc.
mm-hmm,
And I actually think it's the way our brains work that make us more
mm-hmm.
entrepreneurial, and it actually forms part of the DNA. And I think if people are honest, then they would probably say, yeah, actually it does. I think we need to be a little bit strange to take the risk to be entrepreneurs. Um, but I wouldn't say that I've ever let it hold me back either. So in my earlier career, when I was facilitating workshops and things, I would always say, I can't facilitate, think I'm right, so I need a scribe. So I just worked with it, but worked around it so that people didn't have to know. And today, I'm just completely honest about it. I just think for me now, it's like, hey, I'm dyslexic, so I could scribe today, but if I did, you probably wouldn't be able to read it, and it wouldn't make any sense to you. And I just think just bring it out in the open.
Making the people around you aware so you don't feel self-conscious about it, or what's the reason for bringing it up off the bat?
I'd say that's actually it. So you don't feel self-conscious about it. And I also today, I think it's experience tells you, and just as I've matured over life, that well, actually, it's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's a
Exactly.
disability that's there, and so what? It's not prevented me from moving on and creating a great career for myself. So actually, what I would say is, it doesn't matter. You find ways to work with whatever you're presented with, and whether that is some form of disability, some form of race and religion, you work a way
Mm-hmm.
out of dealing with it so that it works for you.
Talking about seeing success and not letting anything hold you back, you have been in male dominated industries for most of your career and achieved management level at a company with only 5% females. How did you navigate the workplace and achieve these milestones?
For me, I would say I've always been myself. I wear my heart on my sleeve and say it as it is. And I think that was really probably one of my strengths. I never tried to fit in or be like my male counterparts.
Mm,
What I would say is that I always think that as a female, I've had to work harder to prove myself, to really get that credibility, to show that you're capable of doing the job, as opposed to it's just the natural progression. And also, I think in terms of navigating the workplace, then for me, it's like find some other allies that are in that senior role. And typically, we do always have we have filters, and we have an unbiased conscious. And I think that whether we like it or not, we all have it in some way. So when then you're having your male counterparts are the ones carrying out the interviews, they're the ones like hiring for the positions, there's no female representation or ethnic representation, then clearly we're gravitated towards like-minded people. So that's always a challenge. So for me, I would always say, get to know the people that are on that panel, really explore them and what they like and don't like. Go and have a chat with them off the record first, just so that you can understand them. And I wouldn't say ever change your way, but maybe sometimes it's the messaging and language between the two sexes I think it is different. So I think it's just being aware of that.
interesting. And when you say get to know them in a different way off the record, would that mean like maybe go grab coffee and not a work setting? How would you go about that?
I would absolutely do it in a non-work setting. So really to try and build a
Mm-hmm.
relationship. And I think it's that interviewing is no different to trying to sell somebody something. It's about the rapport. It's about the relationship that you have and
Mm-hmm.
that you can build with them. At times in my life, I have even looked at football scores, read the paper on a Monday
Mm-hmm.
morning because I know
Yeah.
somebody supports a particular team, just so that I can engage in a conversation at the level that they're interested in. Now, I have no interest
Mm-hmm.
in football at all, but if it was going to help me build that relationship and rapport with them, then I would, spend 10 minutes of my time reading about it. So at least then you could go in and say, hey, great, your team had a great score this weekend, or a bit disappointed, must be upset about that. But it automatically creates a connection. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's the bit that's really important in any relationship.
I completely agree. You started a business from scratch and had to learn everything from marketing, sales, and how to get investors. How did you learn all of this, and what advice do you have for startups or somebody with a product idea but has no idea where to start?
I think for me, I mean, having had a corporate career, I could see or have a vision for how businesses maybe should run
Mm-hmm.
to be successful. So that was absolutely a benefit to me. However, starting from scratch, and I hadn't come across or been exposed to functions like marketing, sales, etc. in my career. So for me, the starting point was really coming up with what is a business plan? And I would say everybody start here. So you have a plan about what your thing is, your product or your service. Then what is a business plan? And it really is formulating that. So it's why? Why are you doing it? Who are you doing it for? Who's going to buy it? Where are they going to buy it? And understanding all of those elements of that plan will really help you, I think, formulate your idea in your head, because I think all too often we maybe have a good idea, but when we actually start to tease out of ourselves some of these more detailed questions, it changes our perspective of where we are and where we came from. So I think that that's really important. There is a lot of support out there when you start looking, and I would say take that support, because trying to do everything on your own, you'll make lots of mistakes. Somebody's already made those mistakes. If you can shortcut those, save yourself time and money in the process, then why not? And where I would go for that help and support, here in the UK, we have things like Business Link. The banks have startup communities. There are innovation spaces and co-working spaces where lots of people with good ideas just hire pods and work together, so you can share ideas around, and also ask for mentors. Now, throughout my whole career, self-employed or employed, running my own business, but throughout all of my career, I would always say, if you need help, go and ask somebody. No, I don't think anybody's ever said no to me. I'm not going to help you. I don't want to.
Yeah.
So, always go and ask for the help, and try and align yourself with a good mentor that's maybe 1 or 2 steps ahead of you, that's experienced what you have. And I think these people change as you go through life and you become more experienced. But do call upon, the help of others, and be there to support them as well throughout their journey. As you start to grow, you may overtake them, and then you can be beneficial to them and help them. So it is a two-way relationship. I don't think you can just take all the time. But I absolutely think that that's where you need to be.
Kind of going off of that, we had a conversation a couple of weeks ago about your aim was to build a company that was scalable, but you needed more cash to do so. Recently, as you mentioned in the beginning of this podcast, you received funding. How did you go about this, and what should those do who are looking for investors?
I think, again, it's depending on where you're starting. So I would say there's different levels of investment. So if you need a few £1,000s, you're very early stage in seed and just want somebody to get going, then I would say your best approach there is to go to either angel investors, depending on whether you're business to business or business to consumer, some of the crowdfunding platforms, and even some banks will give some loans and things as well. There's also things like debt financing that you can go. Now, how did I find out all about this when I first started looking? Well, I literally went to people like the British Business Bank and asked them, well, what are the different variations of funding? Where do you need to be, and at what level should you be able to go out and pitch for the funding? One common theme throughout all of it is you have to have a pitch deck that is going. They don't know your domain. You have to have a pitch deck that convinces them, and they're really invested in you and your idea. And they don't do an awful lot of due diligence about the idea. It really is about you. And do they think you've got the ability to commercialize your idea and what you're doing? If you're looking then for more money, so at your next level, when you're looking for seed type money, then you probably can still go to the angel networks and get that sort of income, or you're starting then to look at venture capitalists, private equity, and those types of things. Again, I would always say use a broker. You can spend an awful lot of time searching the website yourself, looking for these different communities, presenting your pitch deck to them. But as with most relationships, if it comes via an introduction, then you tend to make the relationship quicker, and they tend to take you a little bit more seriously. So I would say use a broker. They have access to varying different levels of investors and different investor types, whether they be high net worths, angels, VCs, Ps. They have access to all of those, and you only pay them a percentage of the money they find for you. So in that respect, I'd say that it's a good service. They can help you build your pitch decks and your plans. They can do practicing with you. So really polish up where you are.
That's actually awesome advice. Do you have any other tips and tricks when it comes to building a deck?
I would say listen to the people around you. But I think for me, in terms of the building the deck, it really is down to the content. I think it needs to be concise, and it really is, what is the problem? That's the first thing. What is the problem that you're going to solve? Who's the team that's going to solve it? Who are the people that are going to buy from you? So what's the customer? What does your competitor landscape look like? Why should we invest in you? How much do you want? What are you going to do with it? What am I going to get for it?
The recession hit 1 year into your business. How did you recover? And since we are in similar times with COVID-19, what advice would you give to those trying to stay afloat?
I think so. Yeah, I set up my first business in 2007, and I'd literally come out of the construction industry, so that's where a lot of my contacts were. So 1 year later, when the recession came, that is the sector as well that's hit hard by a recession.
Mm-hmm.
So at that time, how I recovered was really changing my messaging. So during like recessions and period of hardship, the easiest thing to do is to cut staff because it's like probably your most expensive asset, and it's easy just to chop the heads, to chop money off of your costs. So that's where people tend to focus. At that time, I changed my message completely to say, we're in a world where there is a shortage of skills, and
Mm-hmm.
why do you want to lose your skills or give that talent to your competitors? You want to really do all you can to retain those skills and talent, and make sure that you're the best and stronger when you come out of the other side. But actually, we waste in a business so much. Time, money, and effort, either doing things the wrong way, skills misuses, the wrong person doing the wrong job, so a highly paid person doing a more administrative job, people doing things twice because they're not effective. And I think if you start to look at that and strip all of that out, suddenly your cost base goes down anyway, quite considerably. And then you're more efficient. When you do recover, you've got the resources and the capability to actually do more as well, because you're operating in a more streamlined, effective way.
That's really interesting that you say that, because a lot of businesses, that was one of the first things they did, was cut a lot of staff.
Exactly. And you think the cost of getting that staff back again, so the cost of re-employing those staff, the cost of skills training them, the cost of getting them where to the same position or level as to where the staff were that you've let go, it really is. And that, I would say, is all levels of the spectrum. So even if you took, I don't know, the lowest paid person in my company, somebody that does administration, they didn't come in day one and could just do the administration. They had to learn their role and their processes around that. So still, to be efficient and effective, I would say it takes 6 months. Well, then there's 6 months salary there, plus the recruitment costs. So that's all money you're going to have to reinvest just to get back to where you were. So that's it. So I think it's just being innovative and rethinking where you are. So, COVID again is exactly the same. So, some companies, businesses and sectors have been severely hit by COVID. So like hospitality is a good example there, where others like your pharmaceutical sector and your consumer goods in terms of food and beverages have really exploded during this whole thing. So I think for everything good that happens, then bad happens on the reverse side of that. But again, it's like, how do you be agile enough for it not to affect you? So in terms of e-Bate, the business, we are digitizing a particular process around rebate management. Today, that's managed by multiple people within an organization, typically using Excel spreadsheets. So actually, during the COVID situation where people are working from home, accessibility to that data isn't there. You can't gather around the desk to talk around the
Mm-hmm.
spreadsheet so easily. So it's actually highlighting even more so the need to digitize those processes. If it was online and things were electronic, it's easy to adapt to. Also, those businesses that have been more used to technology have just gone away to work at home during this lockdown period. Have continued more or less as normal, using Zoom and things like that, Microsoft Teams and those types of tools to really continue with their business and their communication. So I think it is just about being agile and really thinking about what you could do differently.
What challenges do you find most businesses face when wanting to digitize? Do you have any tips and tricks to help overcome those roadblocks?
I think for me, the challenges that I find in when businesses want to, to me, it's more they want to digitize, but there's always too much to do. So there's always
Mm-hmm.
too much to do. What are you choosing to do? And quite often, I think it depends on where the decision-making group in an organization sits. So in terms of digitizing, always uses some piece of technology. And I would say, do the business own the technology strategy for what they need as a business to drive the business results, or do IT own the strategy? And typically, where
Mm-hmm.
IT own the strategy, there's a real disjoint because they don't always recognize or have enough knowledge about the process that you're trying to digitize. So I'd say that that's one of the biggest challenges in terms of where we are coming from when we're trying to digitize within a business. Businesses themselves, I always think there's always a lot to do and so much on. And these processes are in existence today. It's just that they're very manual. And I'll give you an example of that throughout one part of my career. So we were doing a piece of work and it was all around business process improvement around accounts payable invoices. So the company we were working for, all these invoices would come in, they would stamp the pieces of paper, enter them into their system, put a sheet on the side of them, put it in an internal envelope, send it all around the business to get them approved. Eventually they might come back and then they would get paid. But what that led to was obviously they were putting them on the system, they were then sending them out. They got lost in the post going out, some never came back. Suppliers then weren't being paid. That was leading to both parties, the supplier and your internal clerk, having to deal with those queries. So the query levels were higher. So there was no straight through processing there at all. And we put a piece of software in that basically took the invoices, scanned them all in, workflowed it all throughout the approval chain. You could see where the bottlenecks were, who was holding it up, etc. So that was a great example of digitizing a process. But the fear of that business, first of all, was like, oh, but we're going to have to get rid of all these stuff. And, we don't want this to be seen as a project to make people redundant. And it's like, well, that isn't actually what you're doing. What you're doing is moving them onto value add activities. So at that same time, that company didn't do any reconciliations of suppliers. They weren't doing any rationalization about where should they be buying from, where could they get the better deals from. They just were processing pieces of paper reactively. So actually, when you look at that shift then and try and work out where can I add value and where could we work better in conjunction with procurement to look at some of this stuff and be able to provide the data analytics to streamline, then that's the bit then that gets them over the edge. But I think sometimes there is that education needed to the businesses as well.
Definitely. Do you have any tips for a company that's currently going through a digital transformation?
I would say embrace it. Take the expertise of the people that you're working with, because quite often when we're trying to replace a manual process, we can't get that manual process out of our head. So I would say, really start off understanding your process today and how it works, and then look at what your to-be process is going to be. Open it up to more people. Really think about, the workflow today, what happens in your manual process. Do things go off system? Do they get signed? Do we have to make phone calls? And how much of that could all be automated? That would then come up with your to-be process as to how we'd like it to be. And only then would I start putting in a piece of technology once you understand that. Because all too often throughout my career, which was one of the reasons I started my first business, was I'd seen software vendors going into businesses saying, hey, we've got this piece of software, it's fantastic, you want to implement it. And the software probably was good, but it would be implemented, it would cost a fortune, it wouldn't work, projects would fail. And I think there was two things going on there. The customer themselves just thought, well, hang on, you're the vendor of the software, you should be able to make it work. That's what you said it did on the tin. And then you've also, so they abdicate responsibility really. In that sense. And then the other thing is that the software vendors themselves would sell you anything. They'd sell ice to the Eskimos. So it is like, sometimes not ethical there. And I think if you do really need to start off with the business process and the people that are operating it. So where are they? What devices do they need? If you're in a cold food factory in a freezer type store, it's got to be a device that this app can work on that's going to be able to, have those extremities of weather. If you're on a construction site where you might drop it in a hole or whatever on a hard concrete surface, it has to be able to suffer that. So you have to understand the people, where they're working, how they want to work, then the physical process itself and what you're trying to optimize and digitize. And only at that point you put in a piece of technology, because all the technology is doing is giving you the ability to digitize that process in the way you want it.
Leanne, thank you so much. This was all so helpful. I appreciate you coming onto the podcast. Where can those find you? What's your social media handle?
So I think the best place is to find me, really. You can look on our website, which is www.e-bate.io. You can also find me on LinkedIn. So I myself on LinkedIn, my name is Leanne Bonner-Cooke. We also have a company LinkedIn page as well, which is e-Bate Limited. So follow the company as well.
Thanks so much, Leanne. I appreciate your time.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much. Good to talk to you.
Thank you for listening to Talking Success, connecting the global fintech community. Feel free to follow us on Instagram at Talent in the Cloud. And if you're interested in exec talent or you yourself are looking for a new exciting change in your career, check out our website, talentinthecloud.io.